Hey, my artist friends, it's Mrs. King's Animoji rather, and I wanted to tell you I'm actually here today at Listwood. I've been to a couple of different schools today, but I thought I might stop here and film some of our art lesson for this week. Now, as you can see, the room is a little bit empty. Actually, it's a lot empty. You're not here, and I miss having you here. But we're going to make the best of it. Up here on the board, we have got the elements of art and principles of design. The elements of art are line, shape, color, texture, form, space, and value. Principles of design are balance, emphasis, unity, contrast, rhythm or repetition, pattern, and movement. So for our lesson this week, we're going to focus on the elements of art that are space and line. We're also going to use the principle of design, rhythm, and repetition. Our goals for this project are to create a drawing using 1-point perspective. We also are going to use line, space, and rhythm, which is often known as repetition, repeating something over and over, to create a drawing that looks like it's going back into space. By the end of this project, you should be able to say, I can use line, space, and rhythm, or repetition, to make my drawing look close up or far away. We also should be able to say, I can learn to use 1-point perspective as a drawing tool. Some of the important creative talk words that we're going to use in this lesson are 1-point perspective, rhythm, vanishing point, and horizon line. All right, so for our project this week, we only need a few things. These are the 3 helpful tools that I'd like you to find. If you can find the first 2, they're most important. A pencil. You can't see that through my Animoji, but a pencil will do. One that's actually visible would be great. Piece of paper too. That's something you want. Paper can be any size. I'm just using a piece of white paper. I'm also going to use a ruler because that's going to help me out tremendously when I draw my lines. If you don't have a ruler, you're just going to try your best to draw straight lines the best you can, but you can also use something else that's straight, like the edge of a book or another piece of paper. Okay, on my piece of paper, I'm going to do something very important. I'm going to make mine darker so you can see it. However, you're going to want to make this light. I'm going to put a dot smack dab in the middle of my paper. Can you see it? All right, that is going to be called the vanishing point. The vanishing point is the point at which lines will vanish, and you'll see what I mean in a second. The other thing I'm going to have you draw is a straight line across your paper. You can see that I have my ruler going right across my paper, and it also happens to be going right through my vanishing point. If you don't have a ruler, that's fine. Like I said, you could even use in the edge of a folder or a book, something else that's straight. I just happen to have a ruler. Voila, there's my horizon line going right through my vanishing point. Now what I'm going to do is I'm taking my ruler and I'm going to connect my vanishing point to the corner of my paper, just like that. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, using the ruler will help, just like that. I'm going to do that again from the top 2 corners. So there you go. Now it looks like a giant X across the paper that goes all the way to the corners and cuts through the center where that vanishing point is. We also have the horizon line that cuts through the center of your paper, cutting it in half. You know, the fun thing about the Animojis is you can change the way you look anytime you want. So I'm going to continue with this one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw some lines in the middle. I'm going to make this look like a road. Have you ever been in the car with your family driving on a long road trip, maybe down the expressway, and if you're looking down the road, you see those dotted lines, and as they get closer to you, they look really large, and as they get further away, they look like they get smaller and smaller and actually closer together. Let me show you what I mean. So see how those lines are longer as they get closer to the bottom of the paper, and they get shorter and shorter as they head towards that vanishing point. That gives you a little bit of an idea that this item is going back into space, or that our road is going away from us. Okay, well my drawing as is just doesn't look that exciting. So I'm going to add some trees, and I'm going to use some of those lines that I drew to help me figure out how big the trees should be. I'm actually going to draw the trees that will be closest to me first. That way, all the other trees will get smaller and smaller and will get a little bit easier to draw. I started my tree by drawing half of the trunk. I'm not going to fit my whole tree on this paper, and that's okay. One thing that's important though is I started the bottom of my tree touching this diagonal line. I thought that would be a helpful place to stop, and I'm going to use this as a guideline. I also am not going to let my tree go up taller, not much taller anyway, than these top diagonal lines, and this will help with our perspective. I added a little V at the top there, and I'm just going to make this kind of like the traditional broccoli tree. Watch. Do you see how the top of my tree kind of looks like some broccoli? And I also drew through the horizon line and drew through that top angled line just a little bit. I can erase those lines later. When I draw my next tree, it's going to go right next to this one, but it's going to be a little smaller because the space between these two lines, these two diagonal lines, actually gets smaller. And that is why those lines are there. This is how our perspective is going to be shown. As we get closer to our vanishing point, our trees will get smaller and smaller, kind of like these divider lines in the middle of our paper that represent the dashes in the middle of a road. Now notice that my second tree looks a little shorter than my first tree so far, and that's important. We don't want the second tree to be taller or it will look out of place. When I put the leaves on the tree, my little broccoli leaves, I want to make sure that I allow the first tree to overlap the second tree, since this first tree I drew is really closer to me and in front of the second tree. Let me show you what I mean. Notice that I drew my lines for the top of the tree, my big broccoli lines, but when I got to my next tree here, I stopped. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I don't have my camera stand with me today, so it's a little bit wobbly when I'm making the video, and I apologize for that. But I want you to be able to see how I do this. So notice how I stopped right here, because you wouldn't see the rest of this tree since the first tree is in front of it. When I draw my third tree right over here, it is going to be smaller than the first two trees, and I'm going to follow the same directions. My trunk will be a little bit shorter than my second tree, and the leaves on my tree will be overlapped by the leaves on my second tree here. You see my third tree rather, is just a little shorter than my second tree, which also is a little shorter than my first tree. And when I draw the top, I'm going to do it the same way that I drew the second one, letting the second tree overlap the third. Voila, the third tree is drawn. Do you notice that as I draw each tree, as we get closer to the vanishing point, the tree also gets a little skinnier too? That's not by accident. I'm going to draw one more, maybe two more trees in here, and they are going to get quite a bit smaller than the first three that I drew. This time I decided to just draw the trunks of the trees first before I drew the tops, so I knew how many I was going to have in there. Not all of the trees have to overlap. The really cool thing about being an artist and creating art is that sometimes you get to decide whether or not you want to make something a certain way. I made a choice not to overlap that tree. I'm curious to see what your choices are going to be with your drawings. Okay, all of my trees are drawn on the right side. And notice, as you get closer to the vanishing point, the trees get a lot less detailed and a lot smaller, just like mine here. I'm going to take some time and just go and erase some of those extra parts that I don't need. My horizon line shouldn't go through the middle of my trees anymore, so I'm going to erase it, and we will make that side look nice and clean. Time to draw the trees on the other side. Remember to draw lightly. That part's really important. It makes it a lot easier in the long run. I decided I liked drawing the tree trunks first, made my job easier. Erase, erase, erase the stuff that you don't want. I'm erasing those top helper lines, and voila, there is my finished drawing. Well, finished as far as the trees and the road are concerned. Again, notice how as the trees get further away from you, and as the lines get further away from you, things get smaller, they get skinnier, they get closer together. All of those things happen because they are further away, and that is how they would appear if you saw them in real life. So remember, if you're trying this, the When you're drawing objects that are further away, they should be small and they should be close together, just like this. I thought maybe a few extra details might be kind of nice as well, so I'll stick a little squirrel in that tree, stick some birds up in the sky, and fix the road a little bit. I thought it might be a nice idea to do this without a ruler for those of you who don't have one at home. So I'm doing this a little bit differently too. I'm doing it without the top guidelines too. Just remember that as things get further away, they are going to get smaller. So I'm drawing a couple of pine tree-like designs, some mountains in the background. They're really big. They're mountains. Mountains are big. Now it's time to add a little bit of color. I'm using markers. You can use whatever you'd like. Crayons, colored pencils, chalk, oil pastels, whatever you have. Paint. Don't color it at all. The fun part is you do have all those choices to make on your own. I try to color in some of the bigger parts first. It makes my job a little bit easier, and I also use a lot of outlining so I can keep my color where I want it to be. When I was using two different tones of green, I wanted to make sure that one was much lighter than the other, so my trees didn't get lost in the grass. I did the same thing with my mountains, different shades of brown, and I left the white parts alone. A few added details, just because that's what I like to do. I added a few pine needles, just to add a little texture using line. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I just wanted to. Oh, always erase the stuff you don't want because you don't want that sitting there. And this, my friends, is my finished drawing. I didn't add color to the first one that I created because I wanted to leave that one black and white. I might use colored pencils or something else to add color to that later. I can't wait to see what you create. Remember, it doesn't matter if you have the same tools that I have. As long as you have a pencil and paper, that really is all you need for this project. Everything else is just a bonus. Stay creative, have fun, and I can't wait to see what you make. Send a picture or a video of your finished drawings to me at Catherine_King@westiron.monroe.edu.